What is up, fam? Thank you so much for joining us today for a special episode of So Real Sports Talk. I got my brother from another mother, another Desi-loving 49er fan, just like myself, Mr. Rohan Chakravarthy, from pretty much anything that is about the 49ers and writing. Rohan probably writes for them because that is how good he actually is. Rohan, my brother, thank you so much for making the time again, man.
Yeah, man. It's just definitely been a journey the last week. We've seen so much news and we're going to definitely break it down. Thank you for having me on though. Love to be on here. And yeah, definitely. What's up with you, man?
Everything, brother. Every time you come on, man, it just makes me very, very jealous of your hair. But that's not what we came here to talk about. Raphael 5629ers, what up, Sunil, Rohan, and everyone? Thank you so much, Raphael, for joining into the show. Yeah, Rohan, I wanted to get your take because even though the season technically just started, so much has already happened. So there's a lot to go ahead and talk about. And the biggest topic of discussion for 49ers fans is Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the team, Rohan, is still on the
Yeah.
team. So a lot of people thought by 1 o'clock Eastern time that Jimmy either had to be cut or traded for the 49ers to really be a player in free agency. And as of now, they went the route to restructure deals and extend to get underneath the cap versus trading Jimmy Garoppolo. And it is kind of interesting because last week we did the whole cap breakdown show, and you pretty much hit on almost every single person, including George Kittle, who you mentioned was a possibility, even though you weren't a fan of that move, but they ended up doing that as well. The only one that they still haven't done, which I'm assuming they will do, is Jimmy Ward. They still haven't done that. But Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the team. His $25 million is still on the books. And a lot of people are freaking out about that. And I saw today in Twitter, you were saying that you weren't too worried about that, Rohan. So I wanted to get your take. Are people overreacting to the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo still isn't traded?
Yeah, in a way. And I'll say this. I was part of the majority thinking that Jimmy Garoppolo was not going to be on this roster on March 16th. March 16th, of course, being today, the start of the league year. I tweeted out that, this was a little bit in the heat of the moment, but I did tweet out a week ago that I said there was a 100% chance that Jimmy Garoppolo was not going to be rostered on March 16th. And guess what? The 49ers proved me wrong. And I think it's really just been how the market has developed over the last week. When we look at the market, we've seen how the 49ers have responded. They know that Jimmy Garoppolo is kind of on the back burner in terms of the next quarterback being moved because Deshaun Watson has now jumped into the realm. Obviously, we did the show last Wednesday, I believe, and on Friday, Deshaun Watson was cleared of all charges, putting Jimmy Garoppolo back at second fiddle kind of in the quarterback market. And we've seen the Deshaun Watson scales kind of like escalate over the last week. We've seen him talk to a multitude of teams, and there have been more than expected teams being interested, obviously, in one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. So that has kind of delayed the process with Deshaun Watson taking his time. And the main caveat is the Houston Texans were under the cap the entire time. So they don't really have a deadline as to when to trade Deshaun Watson to clear up that cap space of his $35 million contract. So they're kind of like, they're not really pressed for time while the 49ers might be. And so Deshaun Watson, obviously, I've been kind of saying this week, is the first move that should happen, and we're going to wait for that. But some new news came, and that is Baker Mayfield likely being moved from the Cleveland Browns. So are people overreacting? Not necessarily. I do think the 49ers have kind of stuck to their plan in that they haven't really been hindered from signing free agents. They did sign a guy who we'll talk about a little later, but the 49ers have stuck to their plan. They did the restructures that I expected, although I wasn't a fan of one of them. They did the restructures to get under the cap, and they now can hold Jimmy Garoppolo's contract and stay under the cap, although they haven't officially signed Charvarius Ward and Oren Burks, 2 guys that they picked up. So I'm not overreacting to it yet because I do still believe there's a market for Garoppolo, and I do think that he still gets moved once Deshaun Watson falls.
So let me play devil's advocate, Rohan, to the fans. I'll be the voice of the fans that are like, no, Rohan, the $25 million needs to get off the books. We just saw Von Miller go sign a huge contract with the Bills. We just saw Chandler Jones. Dude, that one broke my heart, bro. Chandler Jones is dead to me. But Chandler Jones just still go sign a deal with the Raiders. Hassan Reddick gone. That was somebody that you were pretty high on, when you were talking about free agents for the 49ers to bring in. All of these guys that we were kind of eyeing to be potential players for the 49ers are now gone. And the reason why the 49ers can't really be a player for them is that they have an extra $25 million hanging over their cap like a rain cloud with this Jimmy G contract. So at what point does it become where now you're missing out on opportunities to make your team better because you're not pulling the trigger with this Jimmy G trade?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely fair. I said this earlier today, and I'm part of the group where we shouldn't overreact, but I did say this earlier today, and that is, does the Jimmy Garoppolo trade somewhat hinder the 49ers in free agency? Because the 49ers now, if they're making a move in free agency and don't really have a destination for Garoppolo yet, especially with the like, I'm not saying it's a high potential, but there is probably like a 20% chance he gets cut. They have to account for that $7.5 million in contract negotiations. And with Garoppolo not on the roster and free agents wanting to make sure that their deals go through, they're going to probably have to, like, they're evaluating restructures and other moves apart from a Garoppolo trade to accommodate new free agents, which likely hinders their process and kind of puts them on the back burner. So while they may be interested, they might not be the front runners for certain free agents. And we saw players like Chandler Jones get $17.5 million. Could the 49ers have accommodated that with Garoppolo deal? Yes. But one thing I did say is the 49ers were not going to look to overspend at any position in free agency, especially at edge and especially especially at edge, first of all, and especially at offensive line. We saw that the 49ers did not go for Laken Tomlinson. We'll get to that in a minute. But speaking specifically on edge with these guys like Chandler Jones and these guys like Hassan Reddick, I said that Chandler Jones, the maximum that he could be paid for the 49ers to be interested was around that $13 to $15 million range, with $15 million being the peak per season. He got a 3-year deal too. And a 3-year deal at his age. I think he's going into his age 32 season. That is a little bit worrisome going into his age 32 season for that long of a contract at that much money. So I did think that it was still past the 49ers price range. So even if they had the money, I wouldn't expect them to have signed Chandler Jones, especially Von Miller after he got that huge deal from the Buffalo Bills. So I'm not necessarily worried that the 49ers didn't go out and get those guys, just because I thought they were unrealistic, first of all, given that Chandler Jones was expected to make 15 to 18 on the market. And that's what my prediction was. And that's what he ended up getting. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that Jimmy has hindered them from getting those guys, but it certainly is something to think about in negotiations.
So another, like, playing devil's advocate as far as this Jimmy G trade is, right, there was reports that came out that a team had offered the 49ers a second-round draft pick. There has been, there's been rumors that, they've gotten, multiple picks from the Commanders and the Steelers at one point, maybe not like second and third round picks, but like maybe multiple fourths or some conditional picks. And the 49ers, if these reports are to be believed, have passed on all of these. So that's another thing where some people are like, are the 49ers messing this up by waiting so long to trade Jimmy, or when they had a second round pick, or when they had, multiple draft picks from teams that were, pretty much for sure looking for a veteran quarterback, like the Commanders, like the Steelers, who have now gone, different routes. Is this just a miscalculation by the team?
Now, the second round pick rumors, now obviously it looks like a little bit of a wow. If they got a second round pick and didn't take it and now they're in this position, it may seem a little weird, especially if they don't get that second rounder in return. I still do think a second rounder is a possibility in a Garoppolo trade, just given like who ends up with him and how a market develops. I think there's a possibility. But if they had a second rounder prior to free agency, I think that they would have taken it now looking in hindsight, because not only is the Garoppolo move harming their free agency status, it's also just harming the locker room. This is toxic culture, right? With reports flying everywhere about Garoppolo potentially staying with the team, about the team having to do so much just to keep Garoppolo on the roster when they've made it so clear that they were going to trade him, that the 49ers may be overthinking it. And like, I know one of the guys that I respect very well in this industry is Benjamin Allwright. Albright, a reporter for the Denver Broncos, he says he thinks the 49ers overplayed their hand. And I mean, it's not the first time that we've seen him do it. The 49ers, they think methodically, but they do think that they're kind of had the upper hand a lot. We saw that last year when they tried to trade for Matthew Stafford. Kyle Shanahan thought he had it in the bag, then let it slip the last night when Matthew Stafford ended up going to the Los Angeles Rams because Sean McVay swooped in. So that's definitely something to think. The 49ers, they try and be methodical, but they also try and scrounge for as much value as possible. So when you look at it, I think, like just culture-wise, I would have probably traded him for that second-round pick now, looking in hindsight. But they do try and get as much value as possible.
For sure. And I mean, I'm kind of in between on this, which obviously isn't great because, pick a side, Sunil. But I do believe that them restructuring these deals and not just cutting Jimmy was the right move to make in the situation that we have right now. You kind of mentioned it, and we're about to get in that topic. But one of the biggest leverage or lack of leverage that they had was everybody thought they had to get rid of Jimmy to be able to have cap space to play around in free agency. But the fact that they restructured these deals, got underneath the cap with still allowing Jimmy to be there, now those other teams can't use that as a way to lowball the 49ers. Now, whether or not they still have a deal, I still think there's a path to where Jimmy Garoppolo can still be valued at, a third or second round pick, or like some conditional picks that could turn into a second or a first. But there's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of dominoes that have to fall. And the main domino, let's segue into that, is obviously the quarterback you mentioned earlier, and that's Deshaun Watson, right? Deshaun Watson being cleared of all criminal, at least the criminal aspects of, the allegations was big news for the NFL because that cleared a path where Deshaun Watson could come back and play football in the NFL. Now, most people do believe that he is going to get some kind of suspension next year, but at least you could have him on your team, and he should be able to play, moving forward. Now, obviously, with Deshaun Watson there, Jimmy Garoppolo is like a distant second as far as who you'd want out of those two quarterbacks. So before we move into where you believe Deshaun Watson would be the best for the 49ers, did you believe any of the smoke or any of the rumors that the 49ers were in on Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, and quickly before I answered those, I see 49ers throwback with a question in the comments, and you can just put it up. Do I think the 49ers are overplaying themselves with the Jimmy Garoppolo trade? Me personally, I don't. I'm going to answer that in a little bit with a little bit here. I don't think they're overplaying, but I do understand the concern with what they've been doing. Like, even if they end up with a fourth-round pick and they could have had a second, I'm totally fine, just because at this point, a lot of people just want Garoppolo off the roster, not only to clear up that 25 mil, but because this storyline is dragged too long. And really, we're clinging on to a part of the past when we should be going to the future. And so that's what I think. But going now to your question, do I think of any part of the rumors on Deshaun Watson going to the 49ers? No, I didn't. And I know Jordan Schultz kind of jumped the gun, probably got some false information from one of his sources, and he reported that the 49ers were taking a meeting with Deshaun Watson. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch saw that, and they shut it down immediately. Almost like 50, every reporter in the world that they knew said the 49ers are not meeting with Deshaun Watson. And the point, I think that shows.
I was surprised. I was surprised they didn't phone you up to make you put that out there too, Rohan, with the way you.
I would have put it out there, but the thing is, they kind of showed a clear indication of where they were going at quarterback. And the reason that the 49ers and Watson rumors started was Watson was planned 1A for the 49ers last offseason, for those that don't remember. Before they went to get Trey Lance, before the Watson criminal cases, they were looking to acquire Watson. They probably would have. I think Watson definitely wanted to come to San Francisco. That's part of the rumor as well, because Watson's camp and Watson himself has kind of had an indication that he wanted to go to San Francisco last offseason. He would have waived his no-trade clause for San Francisco, whereas he wouldn't have done it for other teams that fell out of the race last year. But
Mm-hmm.
now with Trey Lance in the books, I just don't think, first of all, I don't think it financially works. The 49ers have kind of come into this season with a plan. This past season, they came in with a plan. They were going to move Garoppolo in the offseason and move forward with the rookie quarterback. Because guess what? Rookie quarterbacks in the NFL, if you have a roster around a rookie quarterback, history shows over the last 5 seasons that you have the potential to make a Super Bowl. In the last 5 seasons, every single Super Bowl has had at least one team with a player on a rookie contract. And that, when I look at it, last year was Joe Burrow,
Mm-hmm.
2021. In 2020 and 2019, Patrick Mahomes played on his rookie contract. And then in 2018, it was Jared Goff against the Patriots. Jared Goff was on his rookie contract before he got the mega extension. And then in 2017, Carson Wentz, who unfortunately was injured, he was the quarterback for the majority of the season, playing at an MVP level, and he was at a rookie contract. So the 49ers realized, guess what? The best way to take advantage of this championship window is going forward with a quarterback on a rookie deal. And Deshaun Watson is a top 5 talent. Don't get me wrong. If you have the option to get Deshaun Watson, you take it 100%, regardless of the circumstances. But in this case, I don't believe the 49ers rumors. I know that Jim Trotter earlier today pointed out that if Deshaun Watson was to clearly say, I only want the 49ers, then obviously they'd show interest because it's a top 5 quarterback. But because there's not a clear indication of Deshaun going to the 49ers right now, San Francisco is going to be smart. They're not going to put out right now that we're interested in Watson when Watson hasn't reciprocated that interest and publicly stated that he wants to come to San Francisco. So I don't believe it, and I don't think that it'll happen. But now going on to, or actually, you go ahead first.
Yeah, no, I was saying that I think that, I believe that there's mutual interest because what people also don't remember, obviously, Deshaun Watson, I think, was plan A. Like you said, the first round picks that they used to go get Trey, I think, were earmarked to go get Deshaun. But then when his off the field situation happened, they had to recalibrate, and then they went after Trey Lance and moved up in the draft. But what some people do forget also, Rohan, is even though they had made that move to go up in the draft, right around the draft was when some Aaron Rodgers news broke that maybe he isn't happy with being in Green Bay. And the 49ers made that call to Green Bay to see if there was a way they could get him, even though they had already traded up in the draft. So it's not beyond this 49er, I guess, front office. They're always going to do their due diligence. And I do believe they probably made a call to Houston to see if there's any way that they can get Deshaun Watson. I do believe they would have made that call. Whether or not they would have actually gone forward with that, who knows? But I do believe that they did do their due diligence and they probably tried to find some information of whether or not they could get it. Because like you said, if you could get a top 5 quarterback, you got to at least make the call, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I do believe Deshaun Watson still can play a role and help the 49ers out because that domino falling can play a role in what happens with Jimmy. So I mentioned that I believe the best fit for the 49ers and for Deshaun Watson is him going to Atlanta. You actually refuted that and don't believe that's true. So tell me why you don't believe Atlanta is the right fit. And then after you do that, tell me where you think the best fit for Deshaun Watson is so that it helps the 49ers trade Jimmy.
Yeah, so first when we talk about the Atlanta Falcons, right? The Atlanta Falcons, if they do trade for Deshaun Watson, who I think are the prime dark horse candidate right now, I think the favorite are the New Orleans Saints. Based on what I've heard about how he liked the interview with the New Orleans Saints, it seems like the Carolina Panthers have now fallen to third in the race, with the Browns kind of easing it at like in that range too. But it seems like the Saints are the favorite right now, with the Atlanta Falcons kind of coming in as a backup because obviously Deshaun Watson's from Atlanta, Georgia. He has an affinity. He was the one who actually reached out to the Atlanta Falcons organization to set up an interview. And owner Arthur Blank, he's actually fairly fond of Deshaun Watson, and he liked the idea. The Atlanta Falcons organization did actually tell Matt Ryan, their quarterback right now, that they were going to talk with Deshaun Watson. They've been fairly transparent with it. So they kind of showed their intentions. The Cleveland Browns obviously did that too, and Baker Mayfield responded very differently. But when we look at it, yeah.
I like that little jab right there, Ron.
That was very interesting, that tweet. But Baker Mayfield, the Atlanta Falcons, right? If the Deshaun Watson is traded there, Matt Ryan is likely not going back to Houston. Houston seems primed for a rebuild. They'd probably prefer a competition of draft picks, meaning that there's not really an open spot that opens up with the Jimmy Garoppolo trade because Matt Ryan now is available, and I know he's not going to be traded in the division. So really, the only spot that kind of opens up right there is Carolina. But Carolina, they might not want to succumb for third in the division, especially in a competitive NFC where you have 3 teams that are good in the NFC West, and then another 2 now because Deshaun Watson is going to make if Deshaun Watson goes to the Falcons, they're now in competition for potentially making the playoffs.
Can I push back a little bit, Rohan?
Go for it.
So the reason why I thought Atlanta getting Deshaun Watson is a benefit is because it increases the amount of teams that still need a quarterback, right? Because nobody was thinking about Atlanta as an option, right? It's kind of so if Atlanta gets the quarterback, then obviously these other teams still need a quarterback. Now I understand you saying that Matt Ryan now then becomes available and maybe he doesn't go to Houston, but Matt Ryan's contract is much heavier contract than Jimmy's contract, right? Which a lot of people were already saying the reason why Jimmy's having a hard time being traded, nobody wants to pay Jimmy $25 million. Well, I don't know how many teams want to pay Matt Ryan $40 million or whatever he's owed per year at his age, and that kind of ability. So, like you said, maybe I mean they would still leave Carolina, it would still leave New Orleans, it would still leave Indy, and maybe even possibly Cleveland now. And I do agree, I do understand. Okay, well then Baker, Matt Ryan, and now Jimmy are all the 3 quarterbacks available, but having 4 teams that still need a quarterback is better than having 2 teams or 3 teams. You know what I mean? So that's where that came about. So tell me why I'm wrong.
I agree. But the thing is, Matt Ryan, right? The contract, while it may seem bad, the cap hit right now is for 2022 is the problem. And I do think that whoever gets him has the ability to potentially maneuver around that contract. I also do think the Falcons will likely eat some part of the Matt Ryan contract to move him in terms of the guaranteed money to help that contract out. But the reason is Matt Ryan and Jimmy Garoppolo are 2 extremely different quarterbacks. Kyle Shanahan has had 2 different systems, and he had to change it when Jimmy Garoppolo came in 2018. But it depends on the team, and it depends on the fit. Because if you think about certain teams like Tampa Bay like to push the ball downfield. That's why a guy like Tom Brady was there, but that's also why Jimmy Garoppolo was never in the mix for Tampa Bay.
Right.
And so teams that like guys that can push the ball downfield would prefer Matt Ryan, who's also viewed as a leader in a team, and teams like the Cleveland Browns, who likely now are looking for a new quarterback, could be in the mix for Matt Ryan because Matt Ryan has the ability to push it down in that play action scheme, similar to how he did with Kyle Shanahan. Matt Ryan has worked in that scheme before, in that kind of play action, run heavy type of scheme, although they did push the ball down the field a lot. And Cleveland or a team like Indianapolis could be looking to help their running backs out with the actual competent like passing threat. And Matt Ryan, if he goes to Cleveland, would be put in a situation where he'd have good receivers again, right? Last year he suffered because Calvin Ridley was not on the team for a while. So he was playing with a lot of wide receiver 3 kind of candidates alongside Kyle Pitts. If he goes to Cleveland, he has Amari Cooper. If he goes to Indianapolis, he has Michael Pittman, both established wide receiver 1s. So that's why I think teams might be a little more inclined, just because he's got the ability to push the ball down the field, and he's got the ability to make tight window throws down the field. So it depends on scheme. I think Jimmy Garoppolo still is a good fit for the Indianapolis Colts, but at the moment, it seems like the Colts are out on Garoppolo. However, they might be interested in a guy like Matt Ryan. So that's why I think that Matt Ryan might actually diminish the teams, because the Atlanta Falcons were never in the race for Garoppolo, but Matt Ryan being moved might have an extra team that or might have an extra team in the suitors for Garoppolo, for Matt Ryan. But not only that, I think the more important part is it puts Jimmy Garoppolo on the back burner one more time. And I don't think the 49ers want this Garoppolo trade to be as elongated as possible. I think if Matt Ryan gets moved or has to get moved, now we have to wait for teams to evaluate their options between Matt Ryan and Jimmy Garoppolo. And that limits the 49ers even more in free agency, because the bargain signing period in the next couple of days, those players might come and go because they realize the 49ers don't have the adequate cap space, and they might move on and pick other teams. So that's also another possibility that I'm thinking.
So where do you think would be the right fit for Deshaun Watson that helps the 49ers out the most?
I think personally it's the New Orleans Saints, and I'll tell you why. The New Orleans Saints, if they don't acquire Deshaun Watson, seem primed to bring back Jameis Winston. And I know Jameis Winston might not seem like an upgrade to a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, but the thing is, the New Orleans Saints are already financially tied to Jameis Winston. I believe they take on dead cap both this year and next year via void years if they don't re-sign Jameis Winston. But if they do, that dead money hit is now off the books. And so the Saints can save themselves financially by re-signing Jameis Winston, and they actually seem very enticed by the idea to do so should they not pick up Deshaun Watson. So I personally think it takes the Saints out of the books if Deshaun Watson was going to go to the Saints, and it really doesn't take away any other options, whereas an Atlanta trade could. And so it could leave Cleveland available. It could leave Carolina available. It could also leave Indianapolis available. It could leave a multitude of teams available. I just think it frees up one more spot. I don't necessarily think going to the Falcons is a bad thing. I just think it frees up one extra spot, which could then re-drive up the price for Jimmy Garoppolo to an option that San Francisco likes.
So reports are coming out that Deshaun Watson is obviously meeting with Atlanta tomorrow, and he's supposed to make
I think that meeting happened today, if I'm not
the meeting happened today. But tomorrow, I think he's going to announce a decision.
Yeah.
So let's say all goes to plan, Rohan, and Deshaun Watson signs with New Orleans Saints. Where do you think Jimmy goes?
I mean, personally, it seems like this entire time it's gone Indianapolis. And the thing that kind of wavered from Indianapolis was they had leverage, right? They were the only team in the Garoppolo sweepstakes once Mitchell Trubisky got signed, and they had two options. So they could drive down the trade value of Garoppolo if they viewed him as an option, or they could bargain that with Marcus Mariota, who's looking for a starting job and actually is really enticed by Indianapolis. But I think there are a multitude of possibilities. If the Indianapolis Colts prefer Baker Mayfield to Garoppolo, they could trade for Baker Mayfield, who apparently wants to go to Indianapolis, and Cleveland could acquire Jimmy Garoppolo, who apparently wants an adult as their quarterback. I don't know what that means, but Chris Mortensen said that Cleveland apparently wants an adult at the quarterback position. Jimmy Garoppolo is the definition of a leader. You know, he's loved by his teammates, and I think that he'd be a great fit there. But I do think Indianapolis still should be the favorite, with the Cleveland Browns and the Carolina Panthers as dark horse candidates.
I like it. Wandy Lismus, greetings from Germany. What's up, Wandy? Thanks you so much for joining in all the way over there. And he actually thinks, how about Jimmy to the Clowns or Browns? I like the little diss right there too, Wandy. This is something interesting, Rohan. I actually thought, I was saying this even when the season was still going on this last year, because I felt Jimmy was going to get traded. I thought the perfect fit for him was the Cleveland Browns. And the reason why I thought it was the perfect fit is, one, Kevin Stefanski is the coach. Yeah. He had most of his success with Kirk Cousins as the coach, and I think Kirk Cousins as his quarterback with Minnesota. And I think that Jimmy and Kirk Cousins are very similar type quarterbacks when it comes to limited in certain aspects. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, I think, has a stronger arm and throws the ball deeper a lot more than Jimmy does. But Jimmy does have that quick release and, throws the ball underneath very well. Also, Cleveland has a strong running game, which is something that Jimmy needs to be able to be successful. And they have a really good defense, which is something that is imperative for a Jimmy G-led team. That defense has to bail Jimmy out a multitude of times. So for everything that caused Jimmy to be successful at the 49ers, I felt like the Cleveland Browns can emulate that. And just because of the coach that they had there, I thought that Jimmy Garoppolo would be a good fit over there. So initially, I think we might have talked about it on this show, and we found out that, Baker got his 5th year got picked up. So we kind of threw that out. But now it's looking like more and more of a reality. So I definitely could see the dark horse being the Browns and Jimmy fitting in there quite well, actually.
Yeah, I can see that too. And I mean, the thing with Garoppolo and Kevin Stefanski runs a very, very similar offense. And Jimmy Garoppolo has kind of been in this scheme for the past 5 years, meaning it's a run-heavy scheme with a zone read with a good amount of play action involved. And the problem was Baker Mayfield wasn't able to hit the throws that Kevin Stefanski wants. And Kevin Stefanski has kind of been looking to evolve his offense. And the thing is, Jimmy Garoppolo, the thing that he kind of excels at, or maybe not excels, but he plays well at, is these tight window throws in short and intermediate markets. Obviously, he's not a great deep ball thrower, but really neither was Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield struggled with accuracy concerns throughout the entirety of the year. And Kevin Stefanski, in my opinion, is somewhat similar to Kyle Shanahan, and he wants to moderate the game. Kyle Shanahan has a set of 10 plays that he calls at a certain amount of time, and he lets he lets his game plan kind of execute. I feel like Kevin Stefanski is in a very similar mode where he likes to moderate the game. And the best way to moderate the game is knowing exactly what you have in your quarterback. And your quarterback being able to hit these short and intermediate throws, which is why I think he might be a little bit enamored by an option like Garoppolo, who has a very limited ceiling, but you know what you're getting from Garoppolo in terms of the product that you put out on the field. Whereas Mayfield is a bit of an uncertainty. He's so inconsistent, which is why the Cleveland Browns might be inclined to move on. And the thing also with Baker Mayfield is fifth-year options, you don't take on any cap by trading those contracts. That's why some people were floating around trading Mike McGlinchey earlier this offseason. So Baker Mayfield, the Cleveland Browns actually are not on the hook for that $18 or $20 million that Baker Mayfield will make. If they trade him, they're not on the hook for anything, which makes it a little more realistic that they could move Baker Mayfield and still be fine at the quarterback position.
I like it. I like it. And guys, we have, a good amount of people watching live right now. Rohan at Rohan Sports. If you go to his Twitter right now, he just updated the link to his YouTube. This guy is going live. It seems like every day with breaking news on the 49ers. He has great analysis, as you guys can see from the show right now. So go take a moment, go to his YouTube channel and subscribe and, like some of his videos, watch some of his content. If you aren't subscribed to the channel you're watching right now, please take the time to click the subscribe button, hit the notifications. Just helps the algorithm and helps us grow the channel as well. But enough of the shameless plugs. Let's get to the next topic.
Real quick on the shameless plugs. It's really funny in my Twitter mentions right now because I published an article posting the link in this, and I just made the title, "Should we overreact to Jimmy Garoppolo being on the 49ers roster?" Because that's our first question. Uh-huh. Wow, these Twitter mentions, man. I mean, they're calling me the next Grant Cohn. I'll take that. Grant Cohn is one of the best guys, but it's not clickbait. I mean, if you click the link, you'll see the video and you'll pop in. But, I mean, if you call me Grant Cohn, I'll take that as a wholehearted compliment 24/7.
I love it. And thank you for that. So, Rohan, we have seen some of the 49ers unrestricted free agents walk. We saw Laken Tomlinson get the bag over there with the Jets. We saw DJ Jones get the bag over there with Denver. And just today, just a few hours ago, or maybe even less, we saw that Raheem Mostert most likely is going to be signing with Miami for a little over $3 million for the year, 1-year contract. So obviously seeing some of the beloved 49ers leave, it's kind of bittersweet. You're happy that they can go out there and get the money that they need, provide for their families, but also we hate to see them go as well because they were guys that were very productive for the team and fan favorites. And it looks like 49er Throwback is saying Broncos are signing Tom Compton. So another guy from the
true?
49ers.
I didn't see that yet. If that's true, that's crazy. We just got a breaking
according to Tom
live.
Pelissero. According to Tom Pelissero, 49er Throwback, who is somebody that I do trust, is saying
Ryan
that
O'Halloran.
Tom Compton. Cool.
Yeah, 1-year deal.
Another guy, Tom Compton, going to the Broncos. So obviously, there may be more, guys like maybe Jaquaski Tart, K'Wan Williams. So we might be seeing even more players. But of the players that we've seen left so far, Rohan, who do you think the 49ers are going to miss the most?
Yeah, so if we look at it, right, the guys that have kind of been left, right, you said them. We've got Laken Tomlinson. We have got DJ Jones, who signed with the Denver Broncos. Now we have Tom Compton. We also had Trenton Cannon, the return specialist that went to the where did he go? I think he went to the Tennessee Titans. And then Raheem Mostert, who went to the Miami Dolphins. So we have 5 guys now that have kind of left that were like in somewhat of a bigger role in 2021, unless they were injured. And when we look at it, who will they miss the most? It's an interesting question because when you think about left guard, right? Laken Tomlinson was obviously the one Pro Bowler of the group, but Laken Tomlinson, in addition, he played alongside Trent Williams and Alex Mack. The 49ers also have second round pick Aaron Banks, who is projected to slide in and play left guard, his natural position. And I do think that when you have someone at left tackle and center who play at a high level, like Trent Williams and Alex Mack do, that left guard spot isn't as important. The 49ers also haven't valued the guard position as much in recent years. They don't really diverge a lot of resources toward it, which is why it was expected that Laken Tomlinson goes. So I don't necessarily know if they'll miss the left guard spot as much. Then we also see defensive tackle. DJ Jones, the starting nose tackle, leaves. But DJ Jones was primarily a two-down player. He has the ability to be a three-down player, but he was primarily a two-down player. Ark Armstead also was right next to him. And it was really when Ark Armstead slotted in at week 8 when the run game started to pick things up and didn't allow a 100-yard rusher apart from Seattle in week 13, which really wasn't really a 100-yard rusher. But before that, the 49ers were allowing 100 yards on the ground at certain occasions, and their run defense wasn't looking as good as it normally did. So that's another caveat to the defensive tackle position. And then obviously running back, Raheem Mostert, when healthy, could be one of the better running backs on this roster with the speed that is just unmatched and then the vision that is also unmatched. But the caveat is he wasn't healthy in 2021, wasn't really healthy much in 2020 either. So those are the three main players kind of that we've lost. When I look at it, I'll probably go with left guard just because the 49ers at this point, at this moment, Laken Tomlinson was going to be one of the fixtures for Trey Lance in 2022. And offensive line at the moment kind of looks a little weak, right? Because we don't necessarily have a starting right guard. We did tender Daniel Brunskill. I don't know if he starts or not next year, but at Aaron Banks at left guard, he hasn't played in the NFL yet, meaningful snaps. We also don't have a fixture at right guard. So offensive line right now is kind of looking like the weakest position group of all, especially with Mike McGlinchey also coming back from a long-term injury in the torn quad that cost him the remainder of the 2021 season. So I'll go with that position, but I do understand why they let go of the other three of those three players at their price costs. And I do think that they can rebound from losing all three players. What about you?
I like the positivity. 49ers throwback. I want someone better at left tackle position. Either this is a joke or he misspoke, because the one position we don't have any issues at is left tackle with Trent Williams.
We can't get someone better. He's the best tackle in football.
So I think he meant left guard, because clearly that's what Laken Tomlinson played. I too, whenever before the the moves were made, the question was, who is the must sign that the 49ers need to sign back to the team? And my vote was for Laken Tomlinson, just because I don't have as much confidence in the 49ers in their ability to draft and develop offensive linemen. It just seems that their most success has come from people that they have traded for or that were developed from other teams, just like Laken Tomlinson, Trent Williams, Alex Mack, right? So now this is forcing them to be in a situation where somebody that they drafted pretty high in Aaron Banks, who we haven't seen much from, is going to have to move into that role and replace them. So, or replace him. And like you said, he was a Pro Bowl caliber type left guard. Not to mention, he also was an Ironman for the team, missed very few starts due to injury, which is something that is important, especially in an offensive line that was ravaged by injuries, as far as the amount of rotation players that needed to be there. But I do think that, especially we haven't heard, there's no news on it if Alex Mack is coming back quite yet. I don't think he's mentioned it.
I do think the expectation is he returns for 2022. He personally has not made a statement, but it is with pretty good certainty that he returns in 2022, according to what I've heard.
If you're sandwiched between, the best at the position in Trent Williams and then, a Pro Bowl caliber center, even though it's, on the decline in Alex Mack, you would think that you have the best opportunity for success there for Aaron Banks. And, hopefully that will lead to, him at least being serviceable, to say the least.
Yeah.
They did tender Daniel Brunskill, who started at right guard the whole time. Whether or not you like how he played there, at least he does have experience being a starter in the 49ers offensive line. Hopefully he could move back to being more of the utility type offensive lineman where I think he, excels at versus somebody that we have to bank on day in and day out or week after week. But I think that out of those three, just because Mostert obviously when he plays, does a lot of good things for the 49ers, but he just gets injured too much. And I believe that Kosterick can just find guys to plug and play that could go in there
There's one we signed.
You
We
just
signed
signed
one
it, right?
recently.
Not the Hassan you wanted, but still a Hassan that same initials that is gonna come in and maybe be a good rotational player. But yeah, I mean, I think the Lakin Tomlinson move, obviously you have to, the type of money that he was getting, the 49ers clearly weren't about to pay that type of money to him, but he could be the one that I think we will miss the most just because of his ability to play the position and his ability to stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Cool. Well, let us move on. Another big name that is going to hit the market, right? So Julio Jones is reported the Titans are looking to cut him to save some money, on their cap. So Julio Jones is going to be a free agent. Julio Jones was somebody who the 49ers were, flirting with when he was, mentioned to be up for a trade. But now the 49ers don't have to give up any assets. What do you think about this, Rohan? Should the 49ers go after Julio Jones?
So last season, obviously, the 49ers were in the running for Julio Jones. And it's funny because a lot of fans were willing to depart with that second round pick in return for Julio Jones. And the Titans did that. The Titans also took on the majority of Julio Jones's contract and only got 400 yards out of it before releasing him and having to take on some dead cap. Right now, though, Julio Jones might be looking to acquire his last kind of payday. That this was a big contract of his. And people might be looking at the name, but in my opinion, I just don't think Julio Jones fits this team. He's been injured for so long, and I think consistency is something the 49ers want. And I understand that they have a tendency to sign injury-prone players, but the thing is, they sign injury-prone players at a bargain price, and Julio Jones likely will not come at that bargain price that the 49ers might be looking for. If it's $2 million, sure, but are we really thinking Julio Jones is going to sign for a $2 million deal? He'll probably sign for an incentive-based deal that probably goes up to like $5.5 million. So this is why I'm a little against the Julio Jones signing. I also think the 49ers have shown a propensity this offseason to go younger. I think they're trying to get younger, especially with this new regime under Trey Lance, who's a younger quarterback. They're trying to go younger and trying to work on upside and looking towards the future while also maximizing their window right now. And I think Julio Jones kind of takes away from that. I also think it's unrealistic because Jones might be looking still for a starting potential job, and he won't really get one in San Francisco. He'll only play on certain downs, but the 49ers do value run blocking at the receiver position, and that is where Jawan Jennings comes in, and that's where Brandon Ayuk comes in. So he might be having to compete for reps, and with his injury history, it's just a little uncertain. I think that I'm not necessarily saying there are better options, but there might be more valuable options at their price in free agency. There's a guy like Will Fuller still out there who also has had some injury issues, but if you sign him on a deal, he's younger, he's only 27, and he's also shown the potential to be a deep threat in the NFL, while Julio Jones' play is kind of tailed off in the last couple of seasons. So I think Will Fuller might be a little bit of a cheaper option, and he also thinks since he's younger and coming off a season in which he didn't really have much tread on his legs, I do think that he could be a valuable signing. And I also think, there are a lot of guys, and I think that if the 49ers want to get a little lower bargaining guy at receiver, they might also look for a guy who can contribute on special teams because Kyle Shanahan likes that mold of player who works on special teams, but also can play receiver or corner or whatever position it may be, hence the signing of Oren Burks. So that's where my thoughts are on Julio Jones. Obviously, if we acquire him, if he stays healthy, he's one of the better receivers that we've seen, but that's really a big caveat. He hasn't stayed healthy in a while since 2020, really. And so that's why I don't think that Julio Jones is really in the cards for the 49ers.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it. You hit it on the nail on the head. I mean, Julio Jones as just a name is exciting. Just to have that caliber of player, on your team. He's definitely would sell a ton of jerseys, right? With the Jones on the back and, whatever number he ends up playing with if he was on the 49ers. But it just doesn't make sense, Rohan, because whose reps is he going to take? You know what I mean? We have Debo, who we already know is going to definitely be on the field. I truly still believe that Brandon Ayuk is going to have his breakout season this upcoming year. And, Jawan Jennings is just the perfect third option for, what the 49ers need because, Jawan Jennings, the third option isn't going to get a lot of targets, right? This passing offense already isn't one of the most prolific. Kyle Shanahan run offenses are always bottom 5 in pass attempts per game.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And Trey Lance is coming off of a college career where he averaged 16 passes per game. So if people expect him to be Joey Burrow and throw the ball, 40, 50 times a game, that's just not going to happen, right? So it's already going to be 25 to 28 passes per game. A lot of those are going to be underneath. But like you said, the receivers that Kyle Shanahan needs are guys that are going to play hard, regardless of if they're getting the ball in their hands, and are going to block, are going to show that intensity. And I think Jawan Jennings is the epitome of that. With what he brought with his energy and blocking in the tail end of the season and the possessions that he was able to do on third downs, I think are going to be big. I expect Brandon Ayuk to have his breakout season this year. And obviously Debo is the bona fide one on the team right now. And then you have Kittle and the running backs that are going to get targets as well. So I just think those assets can be utilized somewhere better in a position of need where, Julio Jones to the 49ers just isn't a position of need right now.
Agree. And just real quick before we move on, keep an eye on Julio Jones to the Patriots. I think that could be a potential landing spot. But yeah, I agree with what you said.
Yeah, maybe even I think the Ravens would be another team that could use a guy like maybe Julio Jones as another target for Lamar, and that could be something that would be exciting as well. But yeah, I mean, you had to talk about it, but I think I'm with you. Doesn't seem very likely. But the 49ers have made some moves, right? So obviously the big splash, Charvarius Ward, a young corner from Kansas City Chiefs that they went out and brought in. They brought in a special team specialist in Oren Burks from Green Bay that also can double as a linebacker. Today they brought in Hassan Ridgeway?
Hassan Ridgway. Yeah,
Hassan Ridgway, who just most recently played for the Eagles. And then they obviously tendered Aziz, tendered Brunskill. So those guys are coming back as well, most likely. So yeah, out of the moves that they've made so far, Rohan, how do you like them? What are your favorite moves? What are the moves that maybe you had the question mark to? How are you feeling so far about what the 49ers have done?
I'm interested in what they've done. I know, like, the funny thing was Charvarius Ward, right? He signed very late in the night on Tuesday night. And the hour in which he signed was the 1 hour of the day that I was like off Twitter. So I come back and then I see Charvarius Ward and I see like, oh, a ton of like, wow, that's the player that we signed. Like those type of comments. And I'm like, and then I go and do my research, right? Because I know Charvarius Ward has been a very, very underrated, solid corner in Kansas City, not for the past year, but for the past 3 years. And Charvarius Ward, when you look at the stats, he ranks among top 5 in almost all the metrics last season in terms of completion percentage allowed, average yards of separation. I know there was like a tight window throw percentage where he was top. I think he was first in tight window throw percentage per next gen stats. And so Charvarius Ward is the ideal guy that you want in man coverage. And the one thing that he kind of possesses the 49ers lack was size at cornerback. He's 6'1", around 210 pounds, 205 pounds. And the 49ers, when you look at their cornerbacks, right, you have Emmanuel Mosley, who's short. He's not as tall as you'd like for a number one type of corner. And then Ambry Thomas, he's developing. He probably can add on size, but right now he's a little smaller. He's 6 foot, about 190 pounds, still looking to add on bulk as he enters the league. Charvarius Ward fits the mold of a cornerback number one, and he got 3 years, 40 million, 42 million. And I don't think that the contract is as bad as it looks. We obviously will have to wait because the 49ers aren't going to make it official until Garoppolo is off the roster. But the guaranteed money was only $26.7 million. It seems like it'll be a fine deal. I was a little surprised that it was a 3-year deal. I thought it could have been longer because it gives the 49ers with the potential for an out clause, but I'm fine with the 3-year deal. He's only 25 going into his age 26 season. And when you look at it, Charvarius Ward has the stats to back it up. As a man coverage corner, not only that, he fits what the 49ers want at quarter in terms of he's got a very, very solid resume as a run defender. He was one of the better run defending corners in the league. I remember I saw a stat where he was like top 10-ish in terms of missed tackle percentage amongst corners in the NFL last season. And the 49ers, they value tackling at cornerback. Last season, Deommodore Lenoir kind of struggled at the position. That's why he fell out of the rotation. But guys like K'Wan Williams, guys like Emmanuel Mosley, and even Ambry Thomas to an extent are fairly solid tacklers at the cornerback position. Charvarius Ward fits the mold. He's got all the traits that we want. And he also has the resume over the last 3 seasons. I think he's been a fairly solid corner for a while, in addition to the tackling kind of ability. So I like it. Is the 3-year $40 million price tag a little expensive? It is, but that's the market value for cornerbacks. Apart from J.C. Jackson, cornerbacks were getting a good amount of money. We just saw Darius Williams sign for a 3-year, $39 million deal. That's very, very similar to the deal Charvarius Ward got. I do think Ward is a better cornerback, and so I'm fine with the signing. I didn't really understand the hate, and I do think that it's definitely not as bad as we've seen, knowing how the 49ers structure contracts.
Yeah, I think that most of the hate probably came that all the rumors up until that point was Stephon Gilmore, and he's just like a much more well-recognized guy than Charvarius Ward, because I think, what Charvarius Ward does is exactly what the 49ers look for in a corner, and none of that is very flashy, right? It's like the guy who's only missed 5% of his tackles. Nobody's really looking at that when they're looking at what a corner does. But that's exactly what the 49ers need, right? Another thing that I was really excited about, Rohan, was just how few mistakes he makes as far as penalties, right? He only had 4 penalties the whole season. Yeah. Only 2 were pass interference, 2 were holding. So, that was one of the Achilles heels for the 49ers secondary, was just all of those pass interference, holding type penalties that kept the drives going for the opposing team and kept the defense on the field. So another corner that is young, right, that can play man but doesn't make those mental mistakes, I think is a great asset. And this is one thing that I think a lot of people may be missing with this move. I think it gives the 49ers a lot of options when it comes to how they play this group, because I believe most people think Charvarius Ward and Mosley are going to be the 2 starting outside backs, but then it's like, who's going to play the slot or the nickel corner? Well, because they have Ambry Thomas there, when they do go into nickel, they could bring Ambry in as with Charvarius Ward and move Mosley into the slot, which he played earlier in his career. So now you got 3 studs on the field that all could tackle well, that all are, very aggressive as press man guys, but also, haven't had experience at that position as well. And I think that's just amazing to be able to have 3 corners under the age of 26 that are all there ascending into their prime. I just really like that move a lot, Rohan.
And I agree with exactly what you just said in terms of the packages, because Ward and Mosley are expected to be the 2 guys on the outside in dime packages. But when you move to nickel, you have the flexibility to move Mosley in, have Thomas out there. And now you have 3 cornerbacks who are young, who represent your future, but also you give Thomas meaningful reps on the outside where he's much more primed to make an impact, and then also slide Mosley to the inside where he can utilize his physicality against bigger sized receivers or even tight ends at sometimes, and have a solid trio. Speaking of Charvarius Ward, I don't want to just be an optimist. The one negative Charvarius Ward kind of has is that you can see him get burned at times. But I think the good part about Charvarius Ward is his recovery speed is very good. You can see him recover on plays when he gets burnt and make a play on the ball. he won't necessarily get interceptions, but he defends passes very well. And I think that with the 49ers pass rush, Charvarius Ward won't have to rely on that recovery speed as much because they get home to the quarterback fairly often. And they get to the quarterback fairly quick, which means you don't have to hold up in coverage that much, which is where a guy like Charvarius Ward, who excels in man coverage, is useful. So that's where I think the Charvarius Ward kind of signing kind of fits the 49ers very well.
And then I also like that this may mean that they could take a flyer on a guy like Verrett, because now Verrett isn't necessarily the first guy off the bench. You don't really have to bank on him because you have, 3 guys that you're excited about to play the outside. You can actually bring Verrett along and kind of get him healthy for the tail end of the season and maybe even into the playoffs. And, if you could get a healthy Verrett into somehow playing meaningful ball for the 49ers when they're making that playoff push or in the playoffs, man, that could be like just amazing, because we know what Verrett can do when he's healthy. And, I just think that would be great, as well as takes a lot of pressure off of guys like Ambry Thomas and Lenore, who get another year of not having all that pressure of being the guy, which I think is going to bode well for them in the future as well. Any thoughts about Oren Burks or, what you saw in Hassan as well?
Yeah, so first in Oren Burks, I'll be honest, my initial reaction was, are we going to sign another very similar player to Demetrius Flanagan-Fouts? And the thing is, Oren Burks, what I've heard was a special teams kind of guy. He's a special teams specialist with the ability to potentially play backup linebacker, but he didn't flash as much as at the linebacker position, and we paid him a 2-year, $5 million contract. So $2.5 million per year for a predominantly special teams player. And so I immediately thought Demetrius Flanagan-Fouts, but the thing is, I like this move a little bit for the 49ers because it shows that they're willing to go after their weaknesses. And last year they struggled on special teams. That wasn't really something that wasn't well documented. We were one of the top 6 bottom teams in special teams. I think we ranked 27th or 28th in the NFL in terms of like the amount of value our special teams team provided. So I do think that this is a good move in terms of we're using our cap space wisely and we're attacking places that we have holes at. And I do think that this kind of fills part of that hole because it just makes the special teams group stronger. And the reason that I think the price was $2.5 million, we're seeing these special teams aces per se go for a good amount of money. Jakeem Grant, a guy who's predominantly a kick returner, but also has the potential to play some wide receiver, he went for $4.3 million a year on a 3-year deal yesterday to the Cleveland Browns. So that's why I think the price isn't necessarily as big of a deal. We're seeing special teams guys go for a little heavier of a price this year, which is why they probably have it. And in addition, I think it's only $2.5 million guaranteed. The 49ers do have flexibility with that contract. And then regarding Hassan Ridgway, this is the signing that I really like because Hassan Ridgway coming out of Philadelphia, I've heard from some people, Hassan Ridgway is definitely a guy who can be utilized very well in a 49ers type of scheme. He has movement, and the thing is, he isn't necessarily a 2-down defensive tackle. We're expecting him to rotate in at nose tackle alongside our strong rotation of Kevin Givens and Ark Armstead and all those guys. But I do think that he has the potential to potentially be a fairly solid pass rusher, especially if Chris Kocurek develops him pretty well. So that's what I'm going to say with Hassan Ridgway. I think Hassan Ridgway definitely has the kind of like the room now to flourish because he's in a scheme that kind of focuses on these versatile guys and kind of maximizes their potential. So that's kind of what I think. What do you guys think, or what do you think about both those moves?
Yeah, so let's start with Hassan Ridgway. So my best friend actually is a diehard Eagles fan. And so the minute I saw that this came across the wire, I texted him and I was like, "What do you know about Hassan Ridgway?" And he's like, "Bruh, I loved him as a rotational player for our defensive line. You guys got a hell of a pickup with him." And especially with DJ Jones leaving in free agency, this is a guy who's going to be able to come in that's played on pretty good defensive lines because the Eagles have had a pretty good defensive line. And before he was with the Eagles, he was with the Colts, which also is known for having solid defensive lines. So he comes from the cultures of these nitty gritty type of defensive lines, which I think is going to bode well because that's exactly what the 49ers have as well. He's going to be a rotational player. I don't expect him to be able to slot in as a starter. Yeah. Some of the negatives about him, Rohan, is he has had a couple of stints on injured reserve. So he is somebody who in 2019 and 2020 both ended up on injured reserve. So health might be an issue. So I don't expect him to be somebody who's like, hype. He's going to definitely be splitting time with guys like Arden
Oh yeah,
Key and Gibbons
he'll
and stuff
split
like that.
time. He'll definitely split time, but that's kind of like what the 49ers like, right? And these guys like
Yes.
Hassan Ridgway, where they like to split time. They like to keep these guys healthy, and that's kind of how they prioritized last season, right? And you have Maurice Hurst, who's coming back from injury, who likely slots in to play a good role as well. But
Mm-hmm.
Hassan Ridgway, the thing that the 49ers like, right, from these defensive tackle type of prospects or defensive line really in general, is they like guys who are athletic and who have size. Hassan Ridgway is around 305 pounds. He's got the size, but he's also fairly athletic and he's a fairly good athlete for his size, which is similar to the build of DJ Jones, right? DJ Jones was around 315 pounds, but moved like a freak. I'm not saying Hassan Ridgway is that type of caliber type of guy, but he possesses the potential to utilize that to become an effective player for this team. And that's where I think it's a low risk, high reward signing. You only gave him $1 million guaranteed money on this
Right.
1 year deal. So it's
I agree.
definitely a solid signing.
I think it's a good pickup. And then with Oren Burks, just before we move on, a lot of people don't realize that Oren Burks was actually drafted 18 picks behind Fred Warner. And they have a lot of similarities, Rohan. I don't know if you know this, but they both played, Fred Warner and Oren Burks both played safety in college and then transitioned to linebacker when they went to the NFL. Obviously, Oren Burks is known more for his special teams prowess, but he is a guy who can play coverage as a linebacker and is also known for his speed. He ran a 4.59 40 in the combine. So he's just like Fred Warner in the sense that they're extremely athletically gifted. And we've seen what the 49ers have been able to do with these athletic linebackers. You saw what they were able to do with Dre Greenlaw, who was a day 2 pick, Azeez Al-Shaair, who was an undrafted free agent, and now they're getting a guy like Oren Burks, who we do feel is going to predominantly play on special teams. But just imagine if they could get anything out of him with his athletic prowess to be a guy that could jump in like we saw Azeez Al-Shaair do this year. Now, maybe not this year, but maybe in 2 years. Now you're looking at making another one of these guys who could either play an impactful role for the team or be traded for assets like I expect maybe now Dre Greenlaw is going to be traded this offseason because of them bringing in a guy like Burks. So something to keep their eye on, I guess.
Yeah, and one thing also on Oren Burks, right? This team not only develops defensive line prospects well, but we've developed linebackers well, right? We got 3 solid linebackers. Dre Greenlaw was a 5th round pick. Warner was a 3rd round pick, and Azeez Al-Shaair was an undrafted free agent that we've now developed into 3 startable linebackers on this team. And the thing is, D'Amico Ryan's our defensive coordinator. He was previously the linebacker coach. We still have him for a season. So it'll be interesting to see how he utilizes a guy like Oren Burks and his athletic ability. But yeah, good points that you made.
KPS, thank you for joining the show. Has a question. Can we trade McGlinchey? Who could we get, you think? So go ahead, Rohan. Well, go ahead and answer this. What do you think?
So I personally, we can trade McGlinchey. It's not like we can't. We do save the $10.88 million. He's on a 5th-year deal, so it's fully guaranteed, but we don't take any money if we trade him. But I don't think we will, and I don't think the market value will be high. The reason is McGlinchey already, he's a run blocking right tackle, which isn't really ideal in other systems. The ideal kind of right tackle, right, is a pass protector who's got the ability to move as well in the run game. McGlinchey's kind of the opposite. He's got good feet for the run game, but he's still developing as a pass protector. He's also coming off a season-ending torn quad injury, which some people may feel could be like at the tackle position. Some doctors may have the fear that you can't really return to your old athletic form, which is McGlinchey's specialty. So I don't think that there's going to be a market for McGlinchey. At max, it'd be a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick for Mike McGlinchey. And at that point, I don't think the 49ers are really benefiting themselves because Mike McGlinchey right now is a starting right tackle. You already have so much turnover coming on the offensive line. You're starting Aaron Banks, who wasn't a starter last year. Right guard might be a new starter. And so if you move McGlinchey, you're going to also have to find a solution at right tackle. And that's a position that is very important because obviously Trey Lance is now the quarterback. You want to protect your quarterback as well as possible. So I think McGlinchey provides the highest upside at right tackle. I don't think we move him.
I agree with you. The main question is not who you could get. It's like, how are you going to replace him? And there's not like a bunch of right tackles on the market right now that everybody's like, fiending over. And like I said, I'm not a big, like, we just talked about two extremely good positions of strength that the 49ers do really well at. That's, picking linebacker talent, picking defensive line talent. One thing that I can't say I'm super confident about is their ability to identify guys in the draft and the offensive line, because we haven't really seen them draft a stud that, we could hang our hat on and be like, this is the guy, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, Fernando Orellana, also believes the same way you believe. So let's go. Let's end on this, Rohan. By the way, you've done an amazing job so far.
Thank you.
We're up to 30 people, watching. If you guys haven't subscribed to Rohan Sports, go to his Twitter. He just updated the link finally after however long I had to tell him, dude, your YouTube link isn't working. So he updated it. It is the right YouTube link. Go there so you could get more from Rohan. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, just go there and click the subscribe. I'll give you a second. Awesome. And then make sure to follow here. We're going to have Rohan on a lot more because I love this guy, man. He's really smart and he has
It's reciprocated, man. It's reciprocated.
I appreciate it. So you picked extremely right when you said what the 49ers were going to do. You said that they're going to restructure Armstead. You said that they're going to restructure Ward, which I still think is going to happen. You even said they're going to restructure Kittle, which nobody was saying. You were the first person to say it, and it actually happened. So now that you've seen what the 49ers have done, what do you expect the next moves to be for the team, knowing what is out there and also knowing what the team needs?
Yeah, so in no really order, the internal moves that I believe should happen are 3 extensions. You hit on one of them. I do think the team has to extend Jimmy Ward. He's got a $12.94 million cap hit. He's going into his age 31 season, but he played it extremely well in his last year. He's somehow gotten healthier as his years have gone on, so the injury concerns kind of have gotten away. He's played very well. He played very well last year, and he was durable. So I think that he should be a cornerstone for this especially with the team maybe moving on from Jaquaski Tart. We're not sure yet. He should be a kind of staple in that secondary, especially as the leader that he is. So I do think that they should extend Jimmy Ward, be it to a 2-year extension, 3-year extension, and maybe even a 4-year extension. I think that Jimmy Ward is a move that should happen this offseason. Another guy is Emmanuel Mosley. He's on a 1-year deal now. He signed a 2-year, $10 million deal, extreme bargain last offseason. He's only getting $5 million this year. I think we should extend him. He's only 25 going into his age 26 season, similar to Charvarius Ward. You get him on a 2-3-year deal, maybe worth $7 to $8 million a year, maybe even a little more, just depending on the cornerback market. Guess what? It only hits in 2023 when the cap is expected to skyrocket. So it's okay to pay him a little more than you expect him to. I do think that should happen. He's a cornerstone. He's a top-end CB2. He performed extremely well last year. Completion percentage was one of the best in the NFL in terms of completion percentage allowed, and it was on high volume too. He's gone up against the likes of guys like DK Metcalf, the Rams receiver trio, and he can play both inside and outside. The 49ers value that flexibility. The third move internally is extending Samson Ebukam. He's got a cap hit of $8.25 million this year, and he performed very well over the second half of that season. He was not only getting pressures, but he was a factor in the run game, and he also played more than 50% of the snaps in a majority of the games last season, showing how the 49ers think of him. So I do think that 8.25 million cap hit is a little unfeasible right now, especially with the 49ers looking to make moves. You can release or reduce that cap hit to around $4 million. He's also another young guy, and he's been a good pass rusher. You extend him for the future. You have another guy who you don't have to really worry about with this roster turnover. You have a guy that you can develop and become an even better pass rusher. It was his first year as a pass rusher last year. I think you continue that by extending Samson Ebukam. So those are the 3 moves that I think internally should happen.
So Rohan, you just figured out some moves that saves the team some money, gives them some more flexibility and some more, money to play around with in free agency. Who are they bringing in, Rohan? Who are they bringing in with all this money?
So there are a couple of guys, and I'll first start with the positions. One thing that we've talked about, right? Offensive line. Right now, they don't really have a right guard starter. And what I've heard is the 49ers are more inclined to address offensive line in free agency as opposed to the draft. One of the guys that I was high on was Morgan Moses. He signed a fairly good deal, 3 years, $15 million to be with the Baltimore Ravens. John Lynch did say that he might look for a offensive lineman to compete with Mike McGlinchey, who's coming off that injury. We don't know exactly how he'll look, although reports early are fairly promising. We might sign a guy. He doesn't necessarily have to be starting caliber, but first, starting off at guard, I do think that we bring in a right guard to start in free agency. There's a good abundance of right guards still available on the market. And while the guard price has been fairly high right now, I think with the amount that there are, there might be a couple of bargain signings should the 49ers wait it out and see who still remains on the free agent market. Some names for you: Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who played with the New York Jets last year. He knows the system. We've got Andrew Norvell, who played for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Eric Flowers was just released today from the Washington Redskins, or sorry, Washington, what is it again? Commanders now? Huh? Yeah, my bad for everybody. But Washington Commanders now. We have Billy Turner, who played with the Green Bay Packers. Try Turner, Billy Price. I can go on and on. Will Hernandez is another name. So there are a good amount of right guards left on the market for the 49ers to have. Another position that they could obviously address right now is safety. I personally am for the group that brings back Jaquazi Tart. I honestly think that has a much more realistic chance now of happening. Doesn't seem like there's a high safety market at the moment. Tyrann Mathieu is kind of the last safety remaining. Apart from that, though, there are a lot of solid safeties, but I think Tart leads the pack, and I think the 49ers may be more inclined to re-sign him to a one-year deal. If they don't, there are names like Terrell Edmonds who are on the market that could come cheap, and that's another young option should the 49ers continue their kind of streak of going towards younger players. Terrell Edmonds is a very solid fit in this defense, and you also could look to draft a safety. I do think that there are a good amount of options on the market still. You have Landon Collins, who was released earlier this week. But Terrell Edmonds, Anthony Harris, if you want more of a coverage safety, you got Jabril Peppers. And so there's a solid amount of names out there that the 49ers could look out to get if they don't re-sign Tart. I do think that they probably address right tackle as well. I'm not sure on exactly who it'll be, but they probably address kind of a backup right tackle to go along with it. And I won't be opposed if they go out and get Jason Verrett as well. Incentive-based, maybe a 1 year, $2 million deal, return and play in training camp, see how he goes.
I like it. Raphael 562 Niners, most just signing with the Dolphins. Do you see the Niners drafting a running back, or Rohan, is there anybody in free agency that you think they might try to bring in?
Yeah, and so to answer the question, I do think that they're not done at running back, right? Right now, they have 3 running backs really on the roster. They have Elijah Mitchell, they have Trey Sermon, and then they have JaMychal Hasty, who they tendered to a 1 year deal, and I think that has been official now. So they have 3 running backs on the roster. The 49ers like to run about 5 running backs, maybe 4 to 5 running backs. They cut one last year when they had a group of 6. So we could see them go as much as 5 running backs on the roster next year. Those 3 are on there. We could see 1 free agent and then one guy that we draft. There's a good amount of running backs in this class. Some guys later in the rounds, Tyler Beatty from Missouri. He's a fairly solid pass catcher, caught 54 passes at Missouri this past season. The 49ers are looking for a third down back, especially with Anthony Lynn in the mix. So he could be an option, but there are a very good amount of options in free agency. I know J.D. McKissick just got off the board, but he was signed to a fairly good deal, 2 years, $7 million. So the running back market might not be as high as we expected. There could be very cheap guys in the later rounds in free agency. We could potentially bring back Jeff Wilson Jr. The Miami Dolphins went with Mostert, so we could bring back Jeff Wilson Jr. He could be a very solid guy to kind of retain. Another guy that we could keep on the lookout, we signed him last offseason, Wayne Gallman, fairly solid pass protector, guy for Trey Lance that we could keep around. But there are a very good amount of options. I think we potentially signed 1 running back, and then we end up drafting another running back in a very, very good class, because the 49ers might be inclined to go BPA in this class. So that's kind of my opinion on running back.
Maybe Matt Breida comes back too.
Ooh, that could be a good option.
Right. He played pretty well with Buffalo before he got injured. Rohan, excellent job so far. Before we leave, I just want one hot take, Rohan. Hot take, all right? Are the 49ers going to make any type of splash this offseason? Any player that you could think of, big name guy that they might bring in?
All right, so you're asking me if there was a guy, who do you think it could be? Because personally, sure, I don't believe that there are going to be any splashes after Travarius Ward. I do think that we are kind of done with splashes. We're going to go with the bargain signings right now to fill out the roster. But we've seen how markets go so far. I think that potentially if we get a guy, it could be a guy like Will Fuller at wide receiver to potentially bring wide receiver depth. We could also sign a guard if a guard is viewed as, one of those big kind of guys, because there aren't really many starting holes apart from the offensive line potentially at right guard that are still being able to fill it, right? We got a good quarterback right now. We have a solid running back room in terms of the starters and Elijah Mitchell. We have a wide receiver room. We've got the tight end. We could sign another tight end. That maybe that's a position, because we have been looking for a tight end number 2. I think tight end could definitely be in the mix. OJ Howard just went for a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. I think that is way fairer than the tight end market that has already happened. Tight ends have been expensive, I'll tell you that. We've seen CJ Uzama go for $8 million a year. We saw Tyler Conklin go for $7 million a year. We saw Evan Engram go for $9 million a year. David Njoku's expected to get 10 plus. So we've seen these deals that are very high. But OJ Howard just got, 1 year, $3.5 million deal. So if a guy like Rob Tonyan wants to come join the 49ers, it could be a fairly cheap deal. Evan Engram is still out. Actually, no, Engram was gone. He went to Jacksonville.
Yeah, he just went to Jacksonville.
But guys like Eric Ebron are out there. If we want an old guy, or if we want a veteran, Austin Hooper just got released as a post-June 1st cut by the Cleveland Browns. He could be a very solid fit with George Kittle. So tight end could be a position where we could look to potentially splash or get a guy who might be of a higher caliber and pay him at a bargain price.
Yeah, I think Hooper to the Niners is something to keep your eye on, because I think Kyle Shanahan really likes Hooper. And then I like Bob Tonyan too. I think him and Kittle are like really close. So I think that could be something that eases Jimmy leaving, bring in another one of Kittle's good friends in Tonyan, so that way he still has a bestie on the squad at all times.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would not mind that. Both are fairly solid pass catching options for sure.
Right. Beautiful, Rohan. Just like always, man, you crushed it. Thank you guys in the comment section for making this show go. We really, really, truly appreciate you guys. I know I've said it a multitude of times already on the show, but definitely go give Rohan a follow. He has his Twitter handle right there, Rohan Sports 27. I've lost track of all the places that he writes for, but he writes for, everybody. He has his own
Web Zone. That's the main one. But thank you guys. And yeah, make sure if you guys are still in here, follow the Twitter. Make sure you go and check out the YouTube. I'm going to be posting more daily content. Might do a couple of the extra videos on top of the podcast. Podcast, though, 49ers Red Zone podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also got it on Apple Podcasts. But most importantly, guys, whose show is this? So Real Sunil. Make sure you follow So Real Sports Talk on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button before you leave. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. But thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Sunil, for having me. And I'll be glad to be on here sometime soon.
For sure. And when do you guys usually stream for your podcast?
So normally we do it on Fridays. We are actually going to have a special episode tonight. So stay tuned for those still wanting some 49er content. Normally it is on Fridays, though.
Cool. And just for you guys to know, Rohan and Marco over there on their podcast, they're interviewing prospects. They're not only just sitting there and talking about, the 49ers. They're actually bringing guys in, doing interviews, getting some really good content out there as well, learning about players, and they're doing just a great job pre-draft stuff. So I definitely listen to them a lot. So make sure you guys go over there, give them a listen as well. Like we always say, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we will see you guys very, very soon. Have a beautiful night, guys.